Hello all, very warm welcome to the webinar today. Uh, I am Nilesh. I'll be the speaker today for this webinar, and I'll be the host, will be acting as a host also. All right, so let me quickly introduce myself and then we can jump on to the webinar. I look after the pre-sales at pCloudy. I'll be involved into the solutioning of the product and the solutions for the customers. Today, we are going to see about the successful continuous testing with pCloudy, this particular webinar, where we are going to see how we can leverage pCloudy, because this is typically with the infrastructure part. So we will be talking about how we can leverage pCloudy as such to achieve the successful continuous testing. Now, before we move on for the webinar, just quick housekeeping rules. We have kept all the lines on mute, and we also wanted to have an interactive session here. So what we can do is, if you have any questions during the webinar, any concerns, you can please use the window at the GoToMeeting, GoToWebinar window. Write the questions, and we will try to answer those questions towards the end. We'll also request you to quickly provide us the feedback in case you feel that this webinar is helping you in a way or not, and if you are looking for some more topics to be covered, do reach out to pCloudy and we will try to cover those webinars later. Now let me quickly move on to the next slide to see what exactly we are going to talk about today. Okay, so the agenda for today's webinar will be, we will see how the overview of the continuous testing. What do we mean by continuous testing as such from the mobility DevOps perspective? What all challenges we usually face while implementing the continuous testing, and what tools are typically needed or used for the continuous testing. We'll also see how pCloud infrastructure can be used in the continuous testing environment if we are achieving, or rather we are trying to achieve the continuous testing. We'll also see a case study which we have provided, I mean the implementation which we have done for one of our customer, followed by the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write it there. All right, now before we move on to the next slide, just wanted to tell you what key takeaways you will have from this webinar, towards the end of this webinar. So you will be understanding about the continuous testing. Okay. Any testing practitioner who is aware about automation and DevOps will be able to understand this particular concept pretty much faster. And anyone who is having any information about the continuous testing or heard about the continuous testing and want to understand a bit more about this can also be beneficial for this from this particular webinar. So in a nutshell, this particular webinar is for the beginners. Okay, just wanted to set the right expectations, and we can get into deeper for the continuous testing and implementation in the subsequent webinars for the advanced understanding if needed. So let's move on to the next slides to understand what is continuous testing. Okay, so of course we are talking about continuous testing, but the slide here talks about waterfall model. Okay, so what's the relation between the waterfall model and the continuous testing as such? There is not direct relation as such for the continuous testing and the waterfall model, but I just wanted to make comfortable to all of you and understand how or what is the need to go to the continuous testing, why we cannot achieve the continuous testing, or where the testing happens in the waterfall model. So we will go step by step. Let's understand the waterfall model, right? This is the methodology which we were using in the past. This is typically a sequential model which divides the software development into predefined phases, as we are seeing here, like requirements, analysis, design, coding, testing, and so on, right? Now, each phase must be completed before the next phase begins, with no overlap between the phases. That's how traditionally we do it. Now, each phase is designed for performing specific activities during the SDLC phase. Like when we are talking about design, basically we will be concentrating only on the design to create the design of the software. When we move to the coding implementation, we will be simply writing the code. We are implementing the code, and that's when, once that is done, we come and do the testing. So when we come to the testing and we do the testing, this is a stage, okay, where we will be mostly dealing with manual testing, right? We will be performing the whole lot of functional testing, non-functional testing, but most of the testing used to happen in the manual way. Now, any failure happens in this phase when you are doing a testing. The feedback is given to the development team. Okay, that feedback loop, if you really look at it in the complete dev life cycle of this thing, is at very late. So the whole product is almost created, and we are doing a testing, and if there is a issue, the defect or bug, which we are providing it back to the development team, it is taking a little longer time for them to fix it, and that fixing will come with a cost, right? So to address this, or to overcome this particular thing, I mean, typically the feedback loop is very lengthy in this case, right? So to overcome this particular issue or challenge, what we have done or what industry have done rather, is they have moved to the next stage, which we typically call as agile methodologies, which is basically iterative methodology. We can say iterative. We have done a lot of iterations. Basically, we have created the waterfall model, multiple waterfall models, small waterfall models, and created in an iterative mode to create this agile. So agile method actually proposes the incremental and iterative approach for the software design. Okay, and it divides the whole project into small projects. Okay, the whole project, what we were considering as a waterfall, right, that is divided into small projects. And as a small project, because it can be implemented very quickly, right, errors can be fixed in the middle of the project. You don't have to really worry. The interdependencies will be less. And now, if you look at the testing, it is accommodated in every iteration. So if you see this iteration, or which we call it sprint 1 and sprint 2 and sprint 3, so each sprint you have all the possible things. You will be doing planning, you will be doing designing, building, testing, you will be doing reviews, and then we are launching it, and then the planning for the next iteration starts. So if you really look at it, the feedback, if there is something goes wrong with the code, the feedback which is going back to the development team is very quick, right? It's pretty quick. And the whole advantage of being agile is basically you are making the software shippable at every sprint, right? It will be the case that when you are sprint 1 is over, you will be always having a shippable feature of the product, which you can deliver to the customers, right? So this is one of the advantage of the agile. So if you really look at it, what we have achieved in agile is shippable code in each iteration. The feedback is quick, but to have a successful agile, we have to have automation in the test case, right? Automation of the test cases. I mean, in the waterfall, we were doing a lot of manual testing. When we move to agile, you cannot rely on the manual testing, because the amount of testing which we will have to do is huge, right? Once this is done, when we'll go to the second sprint, there will be a regression test. So this test sheet will also come in picture there, right? So we have to do a lot of testing, right? And the sprints are relatively very small. So we will have to introduce the automation. Okay, automation test cases wherever it is possible, whatever you can do it, that has to be done. So we have achieved, if we have achieved the automation, quick feedback, and shippable code after each iteration. Let's assume that we have done the automation. So this is what 3 things which we can get it out of this. Still, there are some gaps, as the testing is not done in the earlier phase, right? I mean, we have moved to in the sense, if you really look at it, the continuous testing is still not happening. I mean, we have done small iterations, we have done created the automation for a lot of things or whichever is possible. That is all right, but still there are certain gaps because the testing is not still happening completely. Okay, so we have to shift. I mean, if you want to increase the code coverage, test coverage, and fast, you want to achieve the quality faster, right? You have to move to another methodology which the industry has moved to, which we call that approach is shift left. Okay, so the principle of the shift left supports the testing team to collaborate with all the stakeholders early in the software development phase. Really look at it. Okay, traditionally, when we look at the traditional coverage here, you can see the most of the defects or the issues we actually find at the test and deployment phase, right? When we say that we want to move or shift left, basically we are shifting this paradigm to this side, to the left side. And to do this, what happens? I mean, if you want to do this, we will have to involve the testing team. The other teams will start involving themselves in this product right from the beginning, right? So when we bring this team pretty much in the beginning, we are bringing a lot of collaborations among the team members. So if the team member starts interacting right from the beginning of the phase, what will happen is basically they will understand the requirements clearly, they'll understand the designs clearly, they'll design the new test cases to help the software fail fast. Right? That's the whole objective. We have to see if we can fail the software fast. If we are failing the software fast, it means there are issues and that can be fixed immediately. So we can reduce a whole lot of testing time, efforts, and money, of course. So left shift approach is nothing but involving the testers much earlier in the software development lifecycle, which in turn would allow them to understand the requirements, the software design, the architecture, the coding, and of course the functionalities. They can ask tough questions to the customers, business analysts, and developers. They can seek the clarifications. They can also provide feedback wherever it is possible to support the team. So all these things can be achieved by using the left shift approach. So this approach will be useful when we further shift the testing to the left and create more automation tests, right? When we say more automation test, do not think about the functional UI tests. That's what typically we do when as a test practitioner, when we look at the automation, the moment automation, test automation, we say most of the guys will think about UI, functional UI tests, right? That's not something which we are talking about. That is, of course, UI functional testing is important, but that's not something which we should be always thinking about. These days, most of the applications have APIs, so we need to create automation of APIs that will help the organizations to move shift left. If you really look at it, there are multiple parts in the testing, right? If you see, we have APIs, we have unit testing, we have integration testing, functional testing, non-functional testing, and we can pretty much automate everything. So we have to automate whatever is possible right from the beginning, and it should start with the unit testing, right? API testing, and those tests you can actually create pretty much in the early stages. The functional test which we usually do as a testing team, or the UI functional test which we call, that is something which happens towards the end. And automating UI testing will be always challenge. There are several challenges to that. We will see if we get time, we will talk about that. But yeah, whatever is possible, you are welcome to create those automations there. All right, so if we see this particular model of left shift, the feedback is quicker and it helps to achieve the quality much faster, mainly because of the automation testing, right? We have created the automation testing. So most of the test practitioners at this stage, when they understand that, okay, we have achieved so much of automation, and we have created so much of automation test, right? We have created the automated testing. So they think that, automated testing is same as continuous testing. Okay, but is that true? Is that same? No, there is a difference. There is a difference between the automated testing and the continuous testing. When we say automated testing, typically it means you have got a requirement, you have got the code, you have got the test cases, and you have created those test cases. You are actually writing the test cases so that you can run it in an automated way, right? So you basically just understand, you have got a code, you have written or created the test code, you have authored those tests here, and then you are running it. When you are running it, let's say for example for the integration test, so you have authored that, and then you are saying I'm executing that, right? So you have automated the test. Whatever you were supposed to do it manually, that you have automated, and then you are of course running it, triggering it, and then it gets run. Then once that test execution gets over, you will see, analyze the reports, and then you will probably go and start writing the new test scripts for the acceptance test, and then you can run those, and then it goes on. It goes on, right? So if you really see, there is a wait time for every stage, and then because of this, there is a delay in the feedback. This is what typically when we refer to automated testing. I mean, you have created the test automation, which we call as, okay, I have automated my testing, right? But when we talk about continuous testing, it is a little more than automated testing. Of course, it is. It depends on the automated testing. Automated testing is important, but continuous testing is not automated testing. Continuous testing is little more than that. So you have written the test cases, right? So what typically we assume that instead of you writing it in different phases, you have written it pretty much in the beginning. Okay, you have integrated the code, and once the code is built, once the build is ready, now the entire process without any manual intervention will happen automatically. So there are tools which will do this automation execution also automatically, and that's what we are referring to as continuous testing. Okay, so all these things without any manual intervention will keep on happening automatically. The feedback will be given back to the necessary teams, and if the things are moving fast, let's say automated integration test is done and it is passed, it will not wait. It will straight away move on to the next part of the phase, and it will run the automation for the acceptance test and so on. So that's what we are referring to when we are saying continuous testing and automated testing. Okay, let's move on to the next slide now. Now, I think with the background, whatever we have seen with the different kind of methodologies and models and the testing types, right? Now, I think it is clear to all of you what we are talking about, what continuous testing is, what automated testing is. So now I think it's a time for me to define what is continuous testing. So if you try to define what is continuous testing, I can say it is a practice to get the rapid feedback for development, whatever development you are doing, right? Does that make sense? Yeah. So basically, it's a practice to get the rapid feedback for the development which you are doing. The diagram which you are seeing here is basically a classic diagram which you will see for DevOps, right? It's basically for the delivery and operations, which are happening hand in hand, and this is how the loop will be always shown, right? So this is the planning stage, then we do the coding, then we build, then we do the testing, we go to release, deploy, operate, monitor, and then go on, keep on going. This is what the DevOps story is all about, which most of us might be aware of. So if you see, continuous testing is basically is a bridge between the development, delivery, and the operations. Okay, so this is the place where the continuous testing happens. Okay, now how does this happen? This happens only when you have a lot of tools. I mean, if you see the DevOps is nothing but a practice in which we set up all the necessary tools, we integrate all the necessary tools, and act on certain actions after each action is performed, right? So that's what in this particular scenario you can see continuous testing fits in, right? When we say if you practice so basically if you're practicing the uh, DevOps, right, or you're practicing the CI/CD, which is typically we call continuous integration, continuous delivery, uh, you need to perform continuous testing for two primary reasons. If you're already practicing CI/CD, right, and then you want to perform the continuous testing (CT), then there are two reasons for that. One is it will allow you to fix the issues early in the development and the integration part, which will be much faster, easier, and cheaper than fixing the defects after the deployment, right? So you want to capture pretty much before it gets deployed and fix it so that you can save a whole lot of things on the client costing. And it also reduces the chances that quality and security issues will make it to your production apps, right? So you're making sure that no defects, no issues goes outside your testing phase. These are the two major things which you can achieve using continuous testing. Now we just try to understand what continuous testing is, where it fits in the DevOps story, right? We'll go and see what are the different or rather what are the benefits we can achieve if we are practicing continuous testing in the DevOps. So in general, we'll have better code quality because the unit tests and the code coverage also can be found, and we can also remove the dead code because when you start writing the unit test cases, you can also see whether uh, uh, the code coverage is done completely or not. If there are certain code which is not touched any time, it is eventually a dead code which really you do not need, so you can reduce the footprint. So all these things can be achieved using this. It helps accelerate time to market the software, right? Because everything is happening continuously. That's the whole agenda of having CI/CD and continuous testing. It merges uh, traditionally the siloed teams, right, to meet modern enterprises needs. It dissolves disconnect between the development team, testing team, and the operations teams, basically. So you can start, you can see the team starts working in a true collaboration if it comes in the DevOps basically helps in that sense. It also helps to assess the exact business risk coverage. Basically, it emphasizes business expectations to mitigate the business risks. Um, it of course ensures the better user experience because most of the testing, see, if you really look at it, most of the testing happens in an automated way. Now, as a manual test engineer, when you are getting the build for your testing, if you are having the regression test ready and functional test ready, that will also get tested in an automated way. So you have enough time to really show the talent of the manual test engineer, right? You can do a lot of other exploratory and usability testing during this time. And since the defects are found early, it will save a lot of cost to fix them, right? So that's what the obvious benefits which we are going to get out of continuous testing. Okay, let's understand what challenges we face when we want to achieve continuous testing or practice continuous testing. I mean, we have listed some of the key challenges here. Of course, there are a few more challenges might be specific to the organization, but these are the common challenges which we have noticed here. So heterogeneous testing environments which will never reflect production environment. That's something which we have seen. Lack of DevOps skills and right tools for testing in agile and DevOps environment. And this is something which we are going to talk about in this particular webinar. Yeah, I mean, this web, in this webinar, in the subsequent slides, we'll talk about what different right tools you can use it and stuff like that. We'll talk more about that. We'll also understand the traditional processes in limiting the cultural shifts among development and the QA professionals. Uh, Longer code integration cycles, which generally creates integration issues and late defects, fixes, etc. So all these things are pretty much there as a challenges in achieving continuous testing. So let's move on to the next slide to understand about the right tools, which tools we have to use, or which tools which can be used to achieve the continuous testing. Okay. Now, if you see, there are multiple tools. I have mentioned it here. Okay. If you see, we have we are talking about Jenkins, we are talking about APM, GitHub, Maven, Eclipse, TestNG, and everything is pointed towards the device lab. Maybe the real devices on which you will be executing your test. So there are a couple of points here, right? So when we talk about the main tool for the test automation, when we're talking about automation, because everything is revolving, continuous testing is revolving around the automation, right? So when we have to consider and create the automation, what from the mobility perspective, what comes to our mind first is the right tool for the automation testing. So I'm considering here, most of the industry considers here is the APM. Okay, so you have the APM, and of course you will need some IDE to code your test automation. So Eclipse is something which is widely used. So these are the two things which one can use to achieve the continuous testing. But if you see APM, and now APM has certain limitations. Okay, it has limitations like there is no test case management, there is no test report generation as such, right? This is an automation tool which will just help you to create the automation cases. Right? So what we do usually is then we use the test engine. Okay, so you have APM, Eclipse, then you can go ahead and start using test engine. Now what happens with the test engine? Test engine is this particular framework will help you to overcome the limitations we just spoke about the APM, right? So it will help you to manage the test cases using test annotations, right? You can generate the test reports. You can also create your custom test reports if you want. It can also help you perform unit testing. Now that's something which is important, right? When we are talking about continuous testing, we have to start the testing right from the beginning. So the developer should also start writing the test. And when they have to write the test, they have to write the unit test code. So when they are writing a unit test for any code they're writing, they will have to start writing the unit testing, right? So they can use test engine, they can use JUnit, they can use NUnit, right? There are multiple frameworks, whatever of their choice they can use it, but test engine is something which I'm seeing in the industry is being widely used, so I have mentioned it here. But yeah, as a testing practitioners or the DevOps thing, you can use different tools as well. Next is Maven. So this will help managing the project structure, its dependencies and the test cases, right? So when we are using APM and TestNG, we also prefer to go ahead with the Maven, because this will help easily managing these things like the project structure, the dependencies, and the test cases. It can automatically download the necessary files. If you are having certain dependencies which has to be downloaded, right? You don't have to really worry. It will automatically download pretty much everything from the repository, and all these details can be whatever it is doing, right? It can be specified in the pom.xml file, and then you can use that pom.xml file wherever you want. So that way, it makes perfect sense to use Maven with APM and TestNG. Coming to the next part, of course, GitHub is something which we are seeing. You can use Bitbucket if you want, but yeah, GitHub is open source, so you can use GitHub to keep your code there. You can commit there. You can keep all the things there, right? And coming to the Jenkins. Now, Jenkins is the important tool and is responsible for continuous testing, right? Because if you remember what I was talking when we were talking about the slide about the automated testing and continuous testing, basically continuous testing is a automation of automated testing, right? So you have automated tests, you want to run those automatically one after the other. So this Jenkins is the tool which can be used to automate the test executions. Okay, so this is the most important tool which is responsible for the continuous testing in case you are practicing or you want to start. Now, of course, you can use, so there are several different other tools which can be used in case of Jenkins. There is Bamboo, there is Hudson, right? There are a lot of other tools which you can use. It Circle CI. We are mentioning Jenkins because this is most popular tool. This is open source. This is one of the best tool available in the market. Okay, so that's the reason we have mentioned about the Jenkins. And yeah, most of the cases you will see Jenkins being used in such kind of scenarios. All right, so now we have covered pretty much all the tools which is typically used in the CI or the DevOps environment to achieve the continuous testing. One of the important thing which we have not spoken about is the testing lab. Whatever you are seeing in the center here. The testing lab is basically the component which is possibly the most important pillar for the success of continuous testing or DevOps. When the lab is not stable or it is outdated and cannot support hundreds of concurrent executions across different mobile and OS and the hardware configurations, permutations, continuous testing is very slow and flaky. Okay, so any mature DevOps, typically any mature mobile DevOps relies on a lab that can support the exact level of scalability and elasticity to improve the increase the devices, reduce the devices, and have a variety of devices available there. And for this, we are considering pCloudy here, right? You can see that pCloudy can be used to fit in your DevOps story in the right way. So I'm going to talk about one more DevOps story. I'll just show you the DevOps, typically the mobile DevOps, which we see. We will try to depict that here, and we'll see where all pCloudy can fit in. Let me move on to the next slide. Okay, so I've tried to depict the mobile DevOps cycle here, of course, with pCloudy. So there will be certain tools which I will be mentioning it here. So all these tools are supported. In addition to that, there are furthermore tools which you can use it, what we have used in the previous slide, or anything else which is available in the market can also be supported. So if you really look at it, there are two parts, two logical parts. One is the development side, the other one is the QA side, right? Now, if I talk about the development side, there are developers, right? Here there is a developer who is actually developing the test, developing the code, developing the application, right? Now, if they want to debug their application for some reason, of course, they can use pCloudy. That's what we are trying to showcase it here. But let's assume that they have created certain changes in the code, or they have created a new feature, right? And then they commit. They commit to the GitHub, right? They'll push to the GitHub. Now, once the code is committed, it is pushed to the GitHub. The Jenkins will get a trigger. There are multiple ways to trigger the Jenkins, depending upon what configuration you want to do it. We're going to see that configuration in a while, but there are multiple ways to get the configurations. And once you get the trigger from the Jenkins that the build is rather the code is submitted and it is committed, then Jenkins will take the necessary actions. It will send it to the build server. It will build the application, right? Once the application is built, it will be pushed automatically to the unit testing, right? So that's what your continuous testing starts right from here. The moment you are committed anything, the build will happen automatically. Jenkins will trigger the unit testing on whatever tools you are using, be it CXTest, Espresso, or even APM, which a unit test engine, whatever you want. And once that is passed, okay, once it is passed, the feedback is given to the Jenkins, and Jenkins will take the next step, that it will push this particular build to the QA team that the development team has pushed something and pretty much everything in control. We have passed all the test cases. Let's go on and perform the next test. So QA team would be, maybe they are doing some automated regression testing, right? So once they are doing automated regression testing, everything will happen automatically. Once it is passed, they can, if they want, they can push it for the manual testing for the new features. In case there is a team who wants to do the exploratory testing or whatever they want to do, they can do it here. But ideally, if you see this process of unit testing, the regression, there will be an integration test somewhere which we have not depicted here. That can also happen pretty much everything in automated way. If there is a failure for any chance, let's say this unit test is failed, the response is given to the developer immediately. You can configure a whole lot of things. You can configure, even if I am not developer, I am a stakeholder, you can actually configure my email ID. So the moment there is a failure here, as a stakeholder, I get to know, I get an email saying something is failed. So all those such configurations can be performed in the Jenkins, and developer will be notified immediately. Now let's say this is passed and it has gone to the QA team, and while doing the QA regression or the functional test somewhere here, something gets failed, it will be again, the feedback will be given to the developer immediately via Jenkins. So all these things is what the quick feedback, typically you get it in the DevOps, mobile DevOps. Now whether after this patch, whether to push it to the staging or production, that depends upon your need. So we'll not talk about that. That's something which depends upon the exact need of the uh, uh, of the project. But this is what typically we are talking about. Now when we are talking about the pCloudy and the mobile DevOps, if you really look at it, pCloudy fits in pretty much everywhere. Wherever you need a device, wherever you need infrastructure, pCloudy is suitable there. Be it debugging, when your developer is debugging the applications, if there is a failure and they want to debug that application, how it has happened, they can pretty much do it. They can use, or one can use pCloudy even for the unit testing, for the automation, regression testing, functional testing, integration testing, pretty much everything. So whatever we have seen in the previous slide where we were talking about the mobile lab or the mobile infrastructure for the execution, pCloudy fits in pretty much everywhere. All right, so let's move on to the next part to see how we have achieved the continuous testing, right? So what in this slide we will be doing is I will be running one video where we have shown the demonstration how we have achieved the continuous testing in using pCloudy infrastructure, right? So the screen which you are seeing on the slide here is talking about the code, right? So this is the Android Studio where we have written certain code, right? So if you really look at it, this is a sample code for the sample application which we have written, okay? And we are going to make certain changes in this code, and then we will submit this and uh, commit it to the GitHub, and then we will see how automatically the test execution will happen. All right, now let's go to the other window. We will quickly go to the other window and we will show you how we can configure the job from the Jenkins. Okay, so we have opened Jenkins and we have gone to the configuration, right? When we go to the configuration, basically you can create any job there, right? So we have created a job and we have we are opening that particular job. When we say configure, we are opening that particular job and we are just trying to showcase you what exactly we have done it here, or what you can do it here, right? So there are multiple tabs here which you can notice: general, source code management, build triggers, build environments, build, post build actions. See, these are all things which can be automated. In general, from where you have to get the source code, what build triggers you want, which I was talking about a while ago, what build environment you want, once the build happens, what needs to be done, post build, what needs to be done, everything is pretty much available here. So let's go on and see. Okay, so we are here at the source code management. Now when we talk about source code management, you can see we have given the repository URL, right? This is the repository URL for my GitHub, from where I will be picking up my code, right? And these are the credentials. Of course, you'll have to provide the credentials because GitHub will do the log in there and pull the code from there, right? If you see the build triggers, this is what I was talking about. Depending upon your need, what you want, right? What triggers you want to give it to your test, you can configure a lot of things. See, you can say trigger the builds remotely from certain scripts. So you are maintaining certain scripts, and after you have certain uh, way to understand that now I have to do this testing. So you can actually trigger that through the scripts from remotely. You can build after other projects are built. So if there are a couple of projects, so once one particular project is done and you want to do the building after that project done, so you can actually go ahead and do that. You can build periodically. You can say that I want to do it and so time. You can do that. You can get the GitHub hook trigger for this polling. So this can be done, or you can simply say I want to poll schedule, right? So you can actually say, see here I have mentioned h by 2, which means every half an hour it will actually do the test, right? Every half an hour it will do the test. So all that things can be managed here. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Okay, now coming to the important part of building. So here, when we are seeing building, we can actually provide the wrapper locations where we have kept our test project. Okay, and what is the task which we have to do, and then this is the most important thing which we have called execute on pCloudy, right? Now, this is something which you are seeing is the old approach. We have two ways to handle or interact with Jenkins from pCloudy. One is through plugin. So this is through plugin. So we have installed pCloudy plugin on Jenkins, and then only you can get this particular build option to execute test suite on pCloudy. If you're not using the plugin, and if you're using Maven project, for example, you can pretty much use straight the Maven dependencies, and through Maven you can call the test project. Okay, now we have demonstrated it here using the plugin. To use this plugin, you'll have to see that we have to provide the cloud URL, username and password, right? So when we say cloud URL, that is basically the URL for the cloud on which you want to do the testing. Okay, I will just tell you quickly. So this is basically public cloud. That's why we have written device.pcloudy.com. If it is some other cloud, we have multiple offerings, right? So if you're having your own dedicated cloud, you can give the URL for that. Then you can provide the username for the specific user. You would have dedicated user for a specific CI/CD, and then you have to get the API key. API key you can get it from pCloudy. You can go to the username. You can go to pCloudy, go to the username, and click on the settings link there. Once you click on the settings, you can get the API access key from here. You can get the API access key, copy that particular access key from here, and then you can go to the Jenkins and give that particular thing there and say test connection. So it will do the authentication, and if it is authenticated, it will give the right thing. Now on the step 2, it will help you to get the CLI path and the application path and the duration for the test execution. So you can provide your test execution, your test jar file for your test suite. Okay, and then you can provide the file path from where you can get the file, the application which needs to be tested, the duration, how long you want the duration for each device execution, right? All that things can be provided using step 2. And once that is given, you can move on to the step 3 to select the devices. Now you can go and pre-configure the devices, whatever devices you want to do. Now this is a slight difference when we talk about the plugin and the other approach which I'm talking about. In the other approach, you can mention these devices in the code itself, but here in plugins, you can go and select it here. So I'm going to 9.0.0 and selected two devices, Note 8 and Galaxy S9. Going to 8.0, I'm selecting Galaxy S8, right? So this way you can go and select multiple uh, uh, devices on which you want to perform your test or the execution should happen. So that's what you can go and choose from this step number 3. You can go and change. You can go to any device type version, maybe 7 or 7.1, 6.0, whatever you want, and then you can go and select the specific device. Here you can get to see the list of devices, and then you can go and save this particular job. This way you can configure the pCloudy, the Jenkins job on your Jenkins setup. Okay, and once it is done, now in the interest of time, because see, okay, let's move on first here and make some changes. So here you can see I equal to 5, and then we are incrementing the value of I. So I'm changing the value of I from 5 to 10. That's the change I have done it, and now I'm actually committing this particular code to my GitHub. So I'm just making the documentation here. What I have done, I have changed I value from 5 to 10, and then I say commit and push to the GitHub. Okay, so ideally when this particular thing happens, automatically the Jenkins should start the testing, but we have used the build triggers as after every half an hour, so we will have to wait for half an hour to push this particular trigger this particular test automatically, right? So we certainly we cannot wait for half an hour here. So what we will do is we will manually say build now. You can also manually go and say build now. Okay, so it will build now this particular thing, and it will also build it after some half an hour also. So you can see now there I'm going to do this and clicking on console output. When I go to the console output, you will see the console output mentioning it here. Pretty much everything will be listed here, what is happening around the changes, what changes you have done, right? All those things will appear it here. Below that, we will also see the devices. The build is successful. See, the build is done. These are the devices which I have selected. These are the devices which we have selected: Samsung 8.0, 9.0, and 9.0 Galaxy S9, right? So Note 8, Galaxy S9, Galaxy S8, all these devices we have already selected. So those devices are taken by the Jenkins for the execution. Now you can go to pCloudy, you can go to the My Bookings, and you will start seeing these three devices: S8, Note 8, and S9. These are the devices which is booked or used by the Jenkins to perform your test, right? Now you can go to the Jenkins again configuration and start seeing it here. You can actually see the report link which is generated here. You can copy this report link, you can open this in another tab, and you will start seeing the active sessions. In active sessions, when I'm saying, basically you are going to see the live view. You can monitor remotely what's happening on these devices if case you want to do that. In case you want to see what's happening on the devices, you can pretty much use this open these devices remotely like this and start monitoring this. So you can see now all the three devices are displayed, and the test execution is already started on Galaxy S9. It started on Note 8 and also S8. So this way you can see the parallel execution started happening on all the three devices. There are two test cases, and I believe Galaxy S9 is already done one test case. The second test case is happening, and so on. So you can monitor this. You can pretty much monitor this remotely, how your test is executing. Once your test gets executed completely, the devices from here will be automatically gone. You can see the one device on which the test execution is done is automatically gone. So the two devices, the execution is still going on. It will get over in a while. So we'll just quickly see how it executes. Yeah. Once the execution is done, you can pretty much go to the Jenkins, and we will be showing you the URL for the report. So we will be creating the report. So you can also generate your own reports. If you are, as I mentioned, that if you are using TestEng, you can create your own custom reports, right? We are also providing certain reports. These are very standard reports, may not be very useful because most of the organizations uses their own custom reports, right? So you can go to the reports and open this particular page. Here we are providing you the add-on reports. These are not the reports from the APM. These are the add-on reports which is provided by pCloudy. So this is an additional thing which you are going to get it apart from what you are getting from APM. So this is what we will be providing you: the CPU, memory, battery consumption for your test execution as an add-on value-added reports. Towards the end, you can also see the logs and the videos. Snapshots will not be here. The snapshots will be pulled by your reports, so will not be available here, but logs and videos will be there, which you can download and consume if needed for the testing, right? So we are pretty much done here. Once the execution done, you can see there is one report file generated here. This is the report from the APM side, so you can go and try to open that report and see how this is how you can see it. Three devices we have done. If you click on any of this device, it will actually open the report for that particular thing, and then you can see the environment details, execution details, and so on. So this way you can actually use pCloudy to run the uh, continuous test in your mobile DevOps. Now we're already close to the timings, right? So let me just quickly go to the next slide and quickly walk you through the case study, and then we'll move on to the Q&A session. We're running short of time here. So the case study which I wanted to present it here is about one of the financial group client, which is based out of USA. It's a Fortune 500 company, which is offering the life insurance and protection products. They have 3 mobile applications, right? And they have their customers base with 5 million plus, right? So they have 3 mobile apps and a team of approximately 120 developers spread across 2 or 3 different locations in the globe. So basically, they were all working in silos, right? There were 3 different locations from where they were working in silos, and they wanted to handle the project using the APM for the automation. That was the background about the client and the requirement. Now, the business challenges which they were facing, which they came up with, was low device coverage, okay, unreliable test automations because of these different things, and then different locations. Feedback loop was typically 2 to 3 weeks for any test which is used to happen after every build, right? So, and insufficient testing, right? So we have proposed, we have tailored a solution, we have crafted a solution for this company and offered them an on-premise device lab to meet their needs for a robust continuous testing automation mechanism. Okay, it helped them to scale up their testing efforts and reduce the time for testing by multifold. Okay, they have also increased the device coverage. Now the devices which they were using at each location, now they have removed the redundancy. They have got devices at one place. They created a big lab out of that, right? And they because they were able to get this stable test automation framework and the infrastructure, they were getting quick feedback, uh, which is reduced from 2 to 3 weeks to days time. In a day, they used to get multiple times the feedback as and when the build was triggered. And yes, of course, they have increased the test coverage, because now with the continuous testing, they have increased the test coverage. At the same time, some of the testing part which was not covered earlier because they were not getting enough time, now because of the continuous testing, the test teams, the test engineers are getting enough time to look into that, so they have got that as well. So this is what the case study I wanted to present it here, and now we will move on to the Q&A session. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll try to answer those questions. I know that we are left only with 5 minutes. I will try to accommodate as many questions as we can. For others, we will get back to you on one-on-one basis. Okay. So the first question is from Akash. what is the difference between continuous integration and continuous delivery? Because we have spoken about DevOps here. Okay. All right, Akash. So basically, if you see the difference between the continuous integration and continuous delivery is all about the functions to be done. Okay, what functions they are doing in the DevOps, right? So when we talk about continuous delivery, this is all about build, test, and release of the softwares in continuous manner. Okay, this is what typically we um, do with the continuous delivery. And when we talk about continuous integration, it is typically done prior the building of the software, right? So as a uh, developed software needs to be integrated, right? As we develop the software, it has to be integrated. So that's what we talk about the continuous integration. This is the primary difference between the continuous delivery and continuous integration. I hope I've answered your question, Akash. Okay, there is one interesting question from Rajaram. Is unit testing important? Yes. Uh, Unit testing is pretty much important, Rajaram. Uh, this is the integral part. If I say this is pretty much needed if you want to achieve the continuous testing. Unit testing has to be done. If you want to achieve the better code coverage, better quality of the code, unit testing has to be done. When we are working in the DevOps, uh, the concept of test engineer is no more exists, right? If you would have noticed that these days in most of the industry, people are talking about uh, test dev engineers. Test dev engineers, basically the engineer who can do the development, who can also perform the testing, right? So with this, it is because we want to bring in the automation everywhere, and also the testing for each and every damn thing which we are doing it there, right? So that's what we uh, talk about. So basically, unit testing is pretty important. Okay, follow-up question again by Rajaram. Uh, how do you see unit testing will help, and what kind of unit testing needs to be done? So basically, um, if you really ask me, Rajaram, if you see the traditional practices, uh, whatever we were doing it, let me just try to show you something like that. You know, traditionally before the agile or before the left shift, this is what we used to do it. This is how the uh, uh, triangle we used to have it, right? So there were three parts here. We used to have unit testing here. These are the API testings, if you can read it, and this is the UI testing or the functional part, right? With the continuous testing now, we will have to move from this. The approach will be the reverse triangle, okay, where we will be automating the UI testing here. API testing may remain pretty much same, and unit testing will have the maximum thing, right? So this is what is typically needed, because the whole testing or whole product actually depends upon your code, right? So you have to make sure that we use the unit testing right from the beginning. I hope I have answered your question, Rajanam. All right, in the we are already crossed the time, so I will still try to take one question, the last question, and there are multiple questions here which I will not be able to answer in this time. So I will get back to you personally. Okay, so one question from Sushma, the last question. What is the plugin required to be installed in Jenkins for connecting to pCloudy? Okay, so Sushma, to answer your question, we have the plugins for Jenkins. You can actually refer to our pCloudy documentation page, and on the pCloudy documentation page, if you go to Jenkins, if you search for Jenkins, you will see how we can use Jenkins, and there is a link for the Jenkins plugin which you can download and use it in your code. Okay, but I will still suggest, I mean, you can go through the documentation. Jenkins plugin, if you want to use it, then the code which you have which you want to run, that will be a little bigger because we will be having a lot of APIs which needs to be done. So I will suggest, if you want to run this using Jenkins, and if you are using Maven without plugin also, you can do it in a very simple and clean way. You will have to, of course, integrate it with the new approach which we have based on the capabilities, and with that you should be able to do it very cleanly. But of course, you can get the plugins from pCloudy documentation page. All right, I think we are already overshot by 1 minute. I think I will take up rest of the questions later, and I will reach out to you guys personally with the answers. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. I hope this clears some of your doubts about continuous testing. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye.